Have you lost your damn mind, Justin? Your wife ain't even cold in the ground and you waltz in here holding hands with that tramp. That was how my story began. Not with grief, not with quiet tears or folded hands, but with fury ripping straight out of my chest, loud enough to stop an entire church mid-breath. I am Evelyn Whitmore. I am 68 years old. And the problem I faced that morning was simple to describe, even if it nearly destroyed me. My only son walked into his wife's funeral, holding another woman's hand. Justin stopped in the center aisle, hand locked with the woman beside him. He didn't even flinch. He looked around the church at the neighbors who had brought casseroles, at Madison's co-workers with red eyes and trembling lips, and then he laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not disbelief. A short, sharp, contemptuous laugh. "You all need to calm down," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's not pretend Madison was some kind of saint." The words sliced through me. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What did you say?" Justin shrugged, still smiling, still holding that woman's hand. She was sick all the time, complaining, couldn't keep a job, couldn't even carry a pregnancy without drama. He glanced at Celeste. I was miserable. Everybody knew it. Gasps rippled through the pews. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Pastor Thomas took a step forward, then stopped. I walked toward my son, each step heavier than the last. "She cooked for you. She cleaned for you. She loved you when you were broke, angry, and useless," I said, my voice breaking. "She carried your child while her own body was failing, and this is how you speak of her?" Justin rolled his eyes. "There you go again, always acting like she saved me. She didn't. She dragged me down." Something inside me shattered. I lunged forward and grabbed his coat, my Bible slipping from my hand and hitting the floor. "You ungrateful bastard," I sobbed. "You wouldn't be standing here without her. You wouldn't have a name anyone respected. She gave you everything." I hit his chest with my fists, weak, desperate blows fueled by grief and years of swallowed disappointment. I didn't even feel my own tears anymore. I just kept saying her name. "Madison, Madison, Madison." "Get off me!" Justin shouted. He shoved me. Hard. The world tilted. I felt my feet leave the floor. Then pain exploded through my hip and shoulder as I hit the stone aisle. The sound of my body hitting the ground echoed through the church. People screamed. "Evelyn!" someone cried. I lay there stunned, breath knocked out of me, my hand stretched forward instinctively reaching for nothing, and then Celeste stepped on it. Her heel pressed down on my fingers, grinding them into the cold stone. I screamed, sharp and involuntary. "Oh, please," she said, laughing softly. "Don't be so dramatic. You old women love a performance." She leaned down, close enough that I could smell her perfume, sweet and suffocating. "You should have taught your son better, but I guess the rot runs in the family." Justin didn't stop her. He just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes burning not with regret, but with anger that I had embarrassed him. Celeste lifted her foot slowly, deliberately, like she wanted me to remember the pain. Then she turned toward the altar. Madison's photograph stood there in a simple wooden frame, soft smile, gentle eyes, the same blue dress she wore the day she told me she was pregnant. Celeste picked up a glass of water from the small table beside it. "No," I whispered. "Don't." She looked back at me and smiled. Then, she threw the water straight onto Madison's picture. The glass clattered to the floor. Water streamed down the photo, warping the image, soaking the flowers beneath it. A woman in the front pew sobbed out loud. Someone shouted, "That's enough!" Pastor Thomas rushed forward, but it was too late. Justin laughed again, louder this time. "See?" he said. "Even dead, she's a mess." Something shifted in the room. Not chaos, not noise. Resolve. I pushed myself up on shaking arms, pain screaming through my body, but my voice was steady now. "This," I said hoarsely, "is who you are." Justin looked at me with pure hatred. "You did this," he spat. "You always took her side. Always." "Yes," I said, "and thank God I did." The church doors creaked as someone moved to block them. Phones were raised now. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Good, because that was the moment the speakers crackled to life. A familiar voice filled the church, calm, clear, alive. "Hello, everyone. If you're hearing this, it means my husband thought I was dead." The room froze. Justin's smile vanished. Celeste's face drained of color. I closed my eyes not from pain, but from relief. Madison's voice continued, steady and unafraid. Some funerals are for mourning. This one is for the truth. I looked up at my son, at the woman who thought she had won, and felt something settle deep in my bones. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the funeral, real or not, had only just begun. If you felt her pain, hit the like button and tell us where you're watching from. You might be closer to someone than you think. I wasn't supposed to be the one lying on the church floor, my hand crushed and my shoulder throbbing, while the people I trusted stood frozen in disbelief. But maybe this was the only way they could see what I'd been seeing for months. That Justin, my son, the boy I had raised on Sunday sermons and pot roast dinners, wasn't a man anymore. He was a mask, a polished shell filled with rot and silence. I sat in the emergency pew beside the altar after Pastor Thomas helped me up. The ache in my bones was familiar, but it wasn't age, it was disappointment turned physical. My fingers trembled slightly, still stinging from where Celeste's heel had crushed them. She had retreated into a shadowed corner of the church, whispering furiously to Justin. But no one had left. No one dared. Madison's voice still echoed from the speakers, like a ghost not ready to rest. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Madison wasn't a ghost at all. She was very much alive. And the funeral was our idea. Let me take you back. It started 5 months earlier, when Madison stood in my kitchen, barefoot, pale, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of peppermint tea. The morning sun lit up her cheekbones, but there was no color in her face. She looked at me like someone who'd lost the words for help. "He's been different," she said softly. "Justin?" I asked, though I already knew. "Different how?" "He's careful," she whispered. "With what he says, what I eat. Sometimes I wake up and he's just staring at me." I felt my grip tighten around the handle of the coffee pot. "What does he say when you ask?" Madison gave a short laugh, like exhaling broken glass. "He says I'm tired, hormonal, that I need rest. Then he makes me a smoothie and tells me not to worry about things." Smoothies. That was his new trick. "He makes them every morning," she added, like reading my thoughts. "Won't let me touch the blender. Says the noise stresses the baby." I didn't say anything. But inside me, something old and sharp stirred. The part of me that once raised a sick husband, that once caught an uncle sneaking bourbon into his Coke, that once told Justin when he was 13 that if he ever laid a hand on a woman in anger, he'd find himself alone on the porch with his bags packed. That instinct never went away. "What do they taste like?" I asked. "Bitter," she said. "But I drink them anyway. I don't want to upset him." I looked at her. This girl who came to me after her mother's cancer, who sat in my living room every Christmas, wrapping gifts with too much tape. Who called me Mama Eve like it meant something more than just marriage. I saw her hands, shaking slightly. Not from nerves, from something deeper. "You think he's poisoning you?" I said, steady and quiet. Madison looked up, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. That was the moment the funeral began, not the one at the church, but the one we planned behind closed doors. A funeral for the lies, for the illusion, for the boy I thought I'd raised. The next day, I cleaned out the pantry and kept the jar he mixed the smoothie powder in. Sent it to an old friend of my late husband, a pharmacist who owed me more than one favor. The results were vague, inconclusive, but showed traces of something that shouldn't have been there. Not poison, exactly. Not enough to kill, but enough to weaken, to exhaust, to make someone small. He wasn't trying to end her life. He was trying to erase it, little by little. "I'm not ready to leave him," Madison told me. "Not yet. I need to know why." So we watched. I installed a motion-activated camera under the kitchen shelf. We saw him stir things into her drinks, glance at the doorway, then smile at his own reflection in the microwave. We saw him scrolling insurance claim sites, calling banks, researching policy loopholes. 2 weeks later, I found the name Celeste Marlowe on a hotel receipt buried in his coat pocket. It wasn't just cheating. It was strategy. Madison wanted to disappear. "Let me vanish," she said one night. "Let him think I'm gone, and let's see who he really is." At first, I thought the grief would eat me alive. Not real grief, this strange rehearsal of loss. We forged a death certificate with the help of Dr. Lyman, a retired coroner whose license had expired but whose loyalty hadn't. We created medical files. A fall down the stairs, a miscarriage, a hemorrhage. Quiet, tragic, clean. Then came the logistics. Madison left town. We used a remote cabin my husband once bought as an investment he never touched. She shaved her head, changed her hair color, got glasses. Nobody recognized her, especially not the man who never looked her in the eye anymore. The hardest part was pretending. We planned the funeral down to the hymns, down to the food for the reception, down to the dress I would wear to weep in, down to the exact minute her voice would come through the speakers after Justin spoke. Except Justin never got the speech out. Because I couldn't stay quiet. Because watching him waltz into that church like he was the grieving victim shattered whatever patience I had left. Now, sitting back in that church, watching the crowd finally start to murmur again, I knew the storm had just begun. Celeste had vanished somewhere in the side wing. Justin was pale, sweating, pacing, and the photo of Madison still dripped with water on the altar, like even the image itself wept. A young woman from the choir approached me slowly. Her name was Tabitha. She offered me a bottle of water and her hand. "Do you want to go lie down?" she asked. I shook my head. "I'm staying." She hesitated, then nodded. "People are starting to ask, is it true that Madison's alive?" I met her eyes. They'll know soon enough. Because the voice that had filled the church was only the beginning. Madison was coming back. Not just to breathe, but to testify. And when she did, I wouldn't be the only one falling to my knees. When Madison's voice faded from the speakers, the church didn't erupt the way people imagine moments like that do. There was no screaming rush, no chaos at first. What followed was worse. Silence. The kind that presses against your ears until you can hear your own blood moving. Justin stood frozen in the aisle, his mouth slightly open, his face stripped of arrogance and color. For the first time in his adult life, he looked exactly like the boy who used to hide behind my legs when thunderstorms rattled the windows. Except now, there was no place to hide. Celeste recovered faster than he did. She always did. "That's sick," she snapped, loud enough to cut through the silence. "This is some kind of twisted prank. You people are disgusting." She turned sharply toward the congregation, her voice rising. "She's dead. I saw the paperwork. You don't fake that." I watched her carefully. The tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers curled into her palm. She was calculating, not grieving, measuring exits, measuring damage. Madison's voice came back through the speakers, calm and unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. "Celeste is right about one thing," she said. "This wasn't an accident. It was planned, by people who thought I was weak." A murmur rippled through the pews. Justin shook his head violently. "This isn't real," he said, his voice cracking. "You're lying. You're all lying." I stood slowly, ignoring the pain screaming through my hip. "No, Justin," I said. "This is the first honest thing that's happened in months." Pastor Thomas stepped back from the pulpit as the projector screen behind him flickered to life. Faces turned upward. Someone near the back crossed themselves. The first image appeared. Madison in a hospital bed, pale, fragile, tubes taped to her arm. A timestamp glowed in the corner. Then another image. Justin in the kitchen, his back to the camera, opening a small silver packet, pouring it into the blender before adding fruit, smiling faintly as it mixed. A woman gasped. Loud. "That's illegal," Celeste barked. "That's invasion of privacy." Madison's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You don't get privacy when you're trying to make someone disappear." Justin finally looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes were wild. "You did this," he said. "You turned her against me." I laughed. It came out sharp and broken. "No, you did that all by yourself." The images continued. Insurance websites, policy printouts, a beneficiary line highlighted in yellow, Justin's name, then a hotel receipt, Celeste Marlowe, 2 nights, 1 room. Celeste lunged toward the projector. 2 men from the congregation moved instinctively, blocking her path. "Touch that screen," one of them said quietly, "and you won't like what happens next." For the first time, she looked afraid. Madison's voice softened. I trusted you, Justin, even when I shouldn't have, even when my body was failing and my instincts were screaming. I trusted you because I loved you." Someone sobbed openly now. "I asked myself every night what I'd done wrong," Madison continued. "Why you wouldn't look at me. Why you treated me like a burden instead of your wife." And then I realized the truth. The screen went black for a moment. Then Madison appeared. Not a photo, not a recording. Hair, alive. The side door of the church creaked open and sunlight spilled across the stone floor. People turned slowly, as if afraid their eyes might betray them. She stood there in a simple gray coat, her hair shorter, darker, thinner than before, but standing, breathing, holding herself steady. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then someone screamed her name. "Madison!" She stepped forward, one careful step at a time, her eyes fixed not on Justin, not on Celeste, but on me. I didn't realize I was crying until my vision blurred. Justin staggered backward like he'd been struck. This isn't possible." Madison stopped a few feet away from him. "You should know better than anyone," she said quietly. "You're the one who taught me how convincing lies can be." Celeste bolted. She made it 3 steps before 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway behind Madison. They moved fast, efficient. One grabbed her arm as she screamed and thrashed, the other already reaching for cuffs. "What is this?" Justin shouted. "You can't arrest her. She didn't do anything." An older detective stepped forward, calm, authoritative. "Actually, sir, she did, and so did you." Justin's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a pew to steady himself. "This is insane," he whispered. "You're choosing her over me." I walked past him slowly. "I'm choosing the truth," I said. "I always will." Madison reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, real. "I'm sorry, Mama Eve," she said softly. "I never wanted it to happen like this." I squeezed her hand. "You're alive," I said. "That's all that matters." The detective cleared his throat. "Justin Whitmore, you are being detained pending investigation into attempted harm, fraud, and conspiracy." Justin laughed then, a hollow, broken sound. "You think you've won?" he said, staring at Madison with hatred. "You'll regret this." Madison met his gaze without flinching. "No," she said, "you will." As they led Celeste out kicking and screaming, the congregation parted like water. Phones were out now, faces pale, witnesses everywhere. Justin didn't resist when they took him. He just looked at me one last time. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger. When the doors finally closed behind them, the church exhaled as one. Pastor Thomas sank into a chair. Someone began to pray quietly. Madison leaned into me, her strength finally giving way. "It's over," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "It's begun. Because exposure is only the first step. Justice takes time, and I intended to see it through." They took Justin out the side door, not the front. That small mercy wasn't for him, it was for the church. For the children sitting in the back pews, for the elderly couples clutching each other's hands, for Madison, who didn't need to see him framed by sunlight like some tragic martyr. But I watched anyway. Through the narrow stained glass window near the vestibule, I saw my son being guided toward the patrol car. His head was bowed now, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained where I had grabbed him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not younger, smaller, as if whatever made him a man had finally collapsed inward. Madison's weight leaned heavier against my side. Her knees trembled. "Sit," I told her softly, guiding her to the front pew. "You don't have to be strong anymore." She nodded, pressing her lips together, her breath coming in short, uneven pulls. Shock always comes late. First comes survival, then comes the reckoning. The church was still full. No one left. They sat frozen, whispering behind hands, staring at Madison like she might disappear again if they blinked too long. Pastor Thomas finally stood. His voice shook as he spoke. "Friends," he said slowly, "what we have witnessed today is extraordinary. I ask for calm. Please, let us pray." A woman near the aisle stood up instead. "Pray?" she said sharply. "That man tried to kill her." Others murmured agreement. "This church," another voice said, "nearly buried an innocent woman." Pastor Thomas lowered his hands. He looked at Madison. "Would you like to speak?" he asked gently. Madison shook her head. Her fingers dug into her coat sleeves. "Not here," she whispered. "Not yet." I squeezed her shoulder. "You don't owe anyone anything." The officers returned moments later, asking us to step into the vestry. Statements needed to be taken, questions asked, names recorded. That's when reality finally sank its teeth in. This wasn't a dramatic ending. This was paperwork. A female officer named Ramirez helped me into a chair, insisting on checking my hip and hand. "You should go to the hospital," she said quietly, anger simmering just beneath her professional tone. "I will," I replied. "After." She nodded. She understood. Women like her always do. Madison answered questions in a steady voice that amazed me. Dates, times, substances, the insurance policy, Celeste's name, the slow deterioration, the fear. She didn't embellish. She didn't cry. The truth didn't need drama. It was horrifying enough on its own. When it was my turn, the officer asked gently, "Did you know your son was capable of this?" I stared at the wood grain of the table for a long moment. I knew he was capable of selfishness, I said finally, of cruelty with words. I didn't know he was capable of erasing another human being for convenience. The officer nodded and didn't write anything for a few seconds. Outside, the crowd finally dispersed. Some hugged Madison. Some avoided her eyes. A few apologized to me for doubting, for whispering, for not stepping in sooner. I accepted none of it. Guilt shared too late is still guilt. By the time we left the church, it was nearly dusk. Madison wore a borrowed coat. I leaned heavily on a cane someone had pressed into my hand. The ambulance lights reflected faintly off the church doors, painting everything red and blue like a warning or a stain that wouldn't wash out. They took me to the hospital first. Madison insisted on riding with me, even though the officer offered her protection elsewhere. "I'm not leaving her," she said firmly. "Not now." I watched her from the gurney, this woman my son had tried to destroy, sitting upright with her hands folded, eyes alert, ready. She was no longer the fragile figure in my kitchen months earlier. Trauma hardens some people. It clarifies others. At the hospital, they confirmed nothing was broken. Bruised ribs, sprained wrist, deep tissue damage in my hip, painful but manageable. "What about her?" I asked, nodding toward Madison. The nurse smiled softly. "Stronger than she looks. Afterward, we went somewhere safe. Not my house. Not yet. Too many memories. Too many things that could be twisted, claimed, taken. A small guest house owned by a friend of mine from the neighborhood association. No questions asked. Tea on the stove, clean sheets, silence. That night, Madison finally broke. She sat at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from, and began to shake. "I thought he loved me," she said hoarsely. "I thought I was imagining it. Every time my body failed, I blamed myself. I moved slowly, my joints screaming, and sat across from her. Predators rely on that," I said, "on decent people questioning themselves." She looked up at me then, eyes red, jaw tight. "He was smiling today," she said, "at my funeral." I nodded, and now everyone saw him do it. Silence settled between us, not heavy, not empty, just real. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said carefully, "the world catches up to what you already know." Justin would lawyer up. He would lie. He would blame Celeste. Celeste would blame him. Insurance companies would stall. Courts would crawl. Justice would not be swift. But it would be thorough. Madison exhaled slowly. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I just don't want him to touch my life again." "You won't," I said. "I won't let him." Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far off, life continuing, indifferent. Inside that small kitchen, two women sat across from each other, one who had lost a son and one who had reclaimed her life. And both of us understood the same truth. The funeral had ended. The reckoning had not. 3 days after the funeral that wasn't, I sat across from a detective in a beige-walled interrogation room that smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant. A crucifix hung crooked above the whiteboard behind her. It tilted left. Like even Christ couldn't bear to look at the mess we were in. Detective Arlene Brooks was a black woman in her early 50s, with square glasses, short silver curls, and a voice that could quiet a courtroom without raising above a whisper. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, folding her hands, "we've begun the official investigation into Justin Whitmore and Celeste Marlowe. The DA's office is reviewing charges for attempted insurance fraud, attempted poisoning, conspiracy, and obstruction. I need to ask you about your involvement." I met her eyes. Steady, clear. "I helped Madison fake her death," I said, "to protect her life." She didn't flinch. "You're aware that in doing so, you technically broke several laws." "I'm aware," I replied, "but if I hadn't, she'd be dead, so weigh it however you like." She didn't write that down. Instead, she turned a manila folder around on the table and opened it slowly, revealing half a dozen photos Celeste, in different outfits, hair colors, cities. "She's not who she says she is," Brooks said. "Name's not legally Celeste Marlowe. That identity was stolen. Her real name is Veronica Dorsey." I blinked. "Where is she from?" "Originally?" She tapped the top corner of one of the documents. "Davenport, Iowa. She has outstanding warrants in 3 states. Fraud, identity theft, 2 counts of elder exploitation. This wasn't her first rodeo." I felt a surge of nausea. "How did she find Justin?" I asked. Brooks sighed. "That's the part we're piecing together. But she's a pattern chaser. Lonely, ego-driven men with access to insurance or inheritance. She hooks them when they're weak. Grief, divorce, bankruptcy. She gets them to sign documents, then disappears." "She didn't disappear this time," Brooks smirked. "No, she tried to burn down the whole damn altar instead." A pause. "Why didn't she run sooner?" I asked. "She saw the video, she knew she was exposed." "She thought she could turn it around," Brooks said. "These types narcissistic manipulators, they always think they can regain control. But when Madison walked in that church alive, every con she ever pulled cracked open." I closed my eyes. The memory of Celeste grinding her heel into my hand burned hotter than the pain itself. "She enjoyed hurting people," I whispered. Brooks nodded. "And Justin? Do you think he would have gone through with it? The poisoning, the death certificate, the claim?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, that's what hurt most. Not the betrayal, the certainty of it." Back at the safe house, Madison was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a fleece throw blanket patterned with gold leaves. She hadn't left the house since the funeral. Couldn't. The world outside wasn't safe yet, not until the charges stuck, the press moved on, and her name was cleared in every system that once declared her deceased. "I used to think," she said quietly as I entered, "that being erased would be the worst thing that could happen to me. And now?" I asked, sitting beside her. "I think letting someone else write your ending is worse." I nodded. I understood. Entirely. That afternoon, we received news that Celeste had made a deal. "She's agreed to testify against Justin," Brooks told me over the phone, "in exchange for reduced charges. She's trying to frame him as the mastermind." I nearly dropped the kettle. "She's flipping on him?" I asked. "She'll do anything to stay out of prison," Brooks said. "She's blaming him for the poisoning, the insurance fraud, everything. And the courts will believe her?" Brooks hesitated. "That's the problem. Without a recorded confession from Justin, or hard evidence showing him planning the fraud directly, it becomes a question of who manipulated who." I closed my eyes. "He was emotionally abusive," I said. "He isolated Madison, controlled her finances, tracked her phone. That has to count for something." "It does," she said. "But we need more." Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with Madison. Between us, I spread out a worn shoebox I'd found in my attic. Inside, photos, birthday cards, receipts, texts I'd printed, even one of Justin's old journals. Pages of angry scribbles about being trapped, needing freedom, and wanting out. We sifted through every detail. Somewhere in this paper trail was the noose he'd tied for himself. Then Madison found it. A video, low quality, taken from her old phone's backup folder. A conversation from 6 months earlier. She was cooking, he was behind her, and he said clear as glass, "If something happens to you, I still get the payout, right?" Madison's face in the video didn't register at first. She didn't realize what he meant. But now, she pressed pause, rewound, played it again. And again, we looked at each other. "Will that be enough?" she asked. I reached for my phone. "We're about to find out." Brooks met us at the station the next morning. The second she watched the video, her entire posture changed. "That," she said, "is premeditation." They brought Justin in the next day for formal charges. Madison didn't go to court. Not yet. Her name was still fragile, her heart even more so. But I stood outside the courthouse, coat wrapped tight, watching them lead him in, his hands cuffed, his face blank. The cameras flashed. I didn't cry. Not for him. Not anymore. Back home, Madison was baking. Yes, baking. It wasn't her old self returning. It was something new, steadier, firmer. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. "What is it?" I asked, walking in. "Apple pie," she said, "with extra nutmeg." I smiled. "Your favorite." She nodded. "And yours." That evening, we sat on the porch, a blanket across both our laps. Autumn had arrived. The wind carried the scent of burning leaves and distant barbecues, normalcy creeping back in. "I'll testify," Madison said suddenly. "I'm ready." I nodded. "I know you are." Justice isn't a moment. It's a series of choices. And that night, she chose again to fight. And I knew we were only halfway there. The courtroom wasn't like it looked in the movies. No shouting, no gasps, no sudden breakdowns. Just polished wood, sterile air, and a sea of tired faces who'd heard too many lies for too many years. It smelled like old paper and tension. And still, Madison sat tall. She wore a navy blue blouse, minimal makeup, and her natural curls tied back, nothing to prove, nothing to hide. Her hands shook slightly in her lap, but her spine didn't falter. The people around her, the DA, the victim advocate, even the clerk watched her with quiet respect. They didn't know the whole story yet, but they could feel it. So could Justin. He sat across the aisle in a charcoal gray suit, hair combed, jaw clenched. If not for the cuffs around his wrists, he might have passed for just another businessman at a board meeting. But he wasn't. He was a man with 2 pending felony charges, attempted fraud and attempted assault with intent to cause harm. Celeste wasn't there. She had fled her last court-mandated address 2 nights before, violating her plea agreement. The state issued a warrant within hours, but by then, she was already gone. Vanished, just like she had in 3 other states. "You think she planned it?" Madison asked me in the hallway before court began. "She's been planning things since before she met Justin," I said. "That's what people like her do." "She was never going to testify against him," Madison murmured. "No," I replied. "She was just buying time." The prosecutor adjusted strategy immediately. Without Celeste, the weight of the case leaned almost entirely on Madison's testimony and the evidence she and I had gathered. The video of Justin's offhand comment, the one about the insurance payout, was damning, but the defense argued it was taken out of context. "He was joking," their lawyer said smoothly. "Dark humor, perhaps, but not a confession." So it came down to Madison. She took the stand on a Thursday morning that felt more like winter than fall. As she swore in, I held my breath. I wasn't afraid she'd crumble, I was afraid they wouldn't see her strength clearly enough. But from the moment she opened her mouth, they did. "I faked my own death," she said calmly, "because I believed my husband was slowly killing me, and I needed to know for sure." She told them about the smoothies, the nausea, the fainting, the paranoia. She told them about the lies, the affairs, the insurance forms. She didn't cry. Not once. The courtroom hung on her every word. When the defense cross-examined, they tried to chip away at her story. "So you're saying you faked your own death to catch him?" "Yes. You do understand how irrational that sounds, don't you?" "I understand it saved my life." They pushed. She stood firm. When it was over, I thought it might be enough. But then, something none of us expected happened. On the 3rd day of the hearing, just before court recessed for lunch, a voice from the back of the room called out, "I have something to say." The bailiff moved quickly. "Sir, you need to—" "No," the man said, stepping forward with his hands raised. "Please, just 1 minute. I have proof." The judge, startled but curious, ordered silence and motioned him forward. He introduced himself as Darren Millstone, a quiet man in his early 60s, slight limp, trembling hands, and as he approached the stand, he said 7 words that changed everything. I knew Celeste before she met Justin. The courtroom froze. He was sworn in and allowed to speak. She went by Rebecca Lawson back then, he said. She dated my brother, drained his accounts, left him with nothing. We tried to press charges, but she disappeared. He pulled out an old photo, grainy, but clear. Celeste. Different hair, same eyes, same smirk. She's done this before, Darren said. And I recognized her face on the news after the church incident. Then he pulled out an envelope. Inside, emails, voicemails, a police report, a restraining order under yet another alias. It was a bombshell. Madison turned to me slowly, eyes wide. Where did he come from? I have no idea, I whispered, but he's heaven sent. The prosecution moved fast. They requested an immediate investigation into the additional identity. The judge allowed the evidence to be admitted as character testimony. Justin's defense began to crumble. By the end of the day, the judge issued an order. Justin would be held without bail until trial, and Celeste, now wanted under 4 different names, was officially declared a fugitive. Outside the courthouse, Darren found us. "I'm sorry it took me this long," he said softly, "but when I saw what she did to you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Madison hugged him. No words, just gratitude. And that night, for the first time since this began, she slept without waking up screaming. Justice hadn't arrived, but its shadow was growing. The day after Darren Millstone's testimony, the media finally caught fire. They weren't there for the funeral. They didn't film Justin being cuffed in a sanctuary full of gasps and tears. But once the headline hit, "Wife fakes death to expose murder plot," the vultures descended. By noon, our front lawn was lit with camera flashes and the low drone of news vans humming like flies. Reporters knocked at the neighbor's door, at the grocery store, even at the old community center where I used to teach knitting on Thursdays. Everyone had a question. Nobody cared if the answer hurt. I drew the curtains. I unplugged the landline. I turned the porch light off and sat on the sofa next to Madison, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words all morning. She held her phone in her lap, but didn't scroll, didn't blink. "Madison," I said gently, "you can't let them win." She looked up, slow and heavy. "They're not the ones who hurt me, but they're the ones making money off it now." I didn't argue. I'd seen the headlines. The photos of her at the church, her pale face pixelated. One outlet used a freeze frame from the court appearance, her eyes mid-blink, an image designed to dehumanize. "I want to disappear again," she whispered. "Just for a while." "You won't have to," I said, "because they'll find someone else to chase in 2 weeks. Scandal doesn't keep its focus long." She nodded. But she didn't believe me. Later that day, Detective Brooks called. "We found something," she said. "Celeste?" I asked. "No, Justin." I felt my breath still. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "There's another policy, not in Madison's name, in yours." I stood slowly, my bones aching in that specific way only betrayal can cause. "He took out life insurance on me? 6 months ago, $500,000. You're listed as the insured. He forged your signature." My knees gave way. I dropped into the nearest chair like the air had vanished. "We found the form in his storage unit, along with a burner phone and logs of his internet searches. Natural poisons, undetectable death symptoms, grief payouts," she listed calmly. "He was planning for more than just Madison." I felt like I was floating outside myself, watching a stranger react. I couldn't find my own voice. "He was going to kill me," I finally said. "He was preparing for the possibility," Brooks replied. "I'm sorry." That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Madison. We sat in the dark kitchen together, 2 steaming mugs between us, the clock ticking loud as thunder. "He was always charming," she said quietly. "People said we were lucky, that he was handsome, polite, stable." I nodded. "Mine too. He made straight A's, held the door for his teachers, but he never cried when his father died, not once. Just kept eating his cereal and said, 'Guess it's just us now.' There were signs. There always are. They just don't look like red flags when they're embroidered with manners and pretty teeth." By the end of the week, Celeste was still missing, but something new surfaced. A woman named Monica Reyes came forward. She lived in Santa Fe. She said she saw Celeste boarding a private shuttle to Mexico, using the alias Isabel Darrow. She recognized her from a church retreat they both attended last year. Celeste had used yet another name then, Sister Elaine. With that tip, Homeland Security got involved. Celeste became not just a fugitive, but a person of interest across 3 agencies. Her photo was broadcast nationally, and for the first time since she vanished, I felt hope that she might not slip through the cracks this time. In the meantime, Madison's trial preparation intensified. The prosecutor brought in trauma specialists, voice coaches, even legal therapists to help her prepare. They knew the defense would come after her character, her sanity, her decision to deceive the public by faking her death, but Madison wasn't afraid anymore. They offered her a chance to deliver a statement on national TV, a way to get ahead of the narrative, as the DA put it. At first, she refused. Then, one night, she came downstairs with her hair done, a navy cardigan over her shoulders, and her grandmother's locket around her neck. "I'm ready," she said. "They won't get to speak louder than me." The taping was quiet. No studio audience, no flashing lights, just a camera crew, a soft armchair, and the truth. She spoke for 21 minutes straight, told her story from the beginning, how Justin isolated her, how he smiled while her body weakened, how she stopped recognizing herself in the mirror, how she thought love meant enduring until it didn't. And then she looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," she said, "and someone is draining your light drop by drop, trust the voice inside you that says something is wrong. You're not crazy, you're not weak, you're just being erased, and you deserve to exist." It aired the next night, and the world changed. Women called in from 30 states. At least 4 men stepped forward saying they'd been conned by Celeste too, and one of them had proof. A phone recording, a voice hers saying, "By the time they find out, I'll be long gone." The case was blown wide open again. But this time, Justin wasn't the only one crumbling. The real hunt for Celeste had begun, and we were no longer alone. She was found in Mérida, Mexico, of all places. Celeste, or Veronica, or Rebecca, or Sister Elaine, take your pick. She was staying in a boutique eco-resort under the name Clara Byrne, posing as a travel writer working on a book called Grieving in Paradise. Fitting, really, always turning pain into performance, always borrowing sorrow to sell her lies. Interpol picked her up without incident. No chase, no disguise, just a poolside arrest in a white linen dress, cocktail still sweating on the glass. When they handcuffed her, she allegedly looked up and said it was bound to catch up eventually. They brought her back on a Thursday, and by Saturday the media was calling it the trial of 2 faces. Justin and Celeste, husband and mistress, accused and con artist, betrayer and betrayer. One claimed the other manipulated everything. The other claimed he was no more than a spineless accomplice. And somewhere in the middle stood Madison alive, wounded, and still fighting. The courthouse was surrounded by people, protesters, survivors, curiosity seekers, the press. Supporters wore pins with Madison's initials, MW, etched into a phoenix feather. Survivors of domestic manipulation came in droves. They called her the woman who refused to die. I held her hand as we entered the courtroom on the first day of the joint trial. The air felt thick. Celeste sat 2 rows ahead, in a tailored blazer, looking serene as ever, until she turned and saw Madison. For just a flicker of a second, something in her face cracked. A twitch at the corner of her mouth. A microsecond of fear. Then gone. Justin sat beside her, looking older than his age, hollow-eyed and sharper around the bones. They didn't speak to each other. Not once. The state opened with the evidence photos, emails, the video clip of Justin's veiled threat, testimonies from Madison, Darren, Monica, and even a few of Justin's former co-workers who noted increasing bitterness and inappropriate jokes about insurance money. Then came Celeste's old victims. A nurse named Eliza from Reno, a widower named Charles from Baton Rouge, each one with stories that mirrored ours too closely to ignore. Lies wrapped in charm, affection weaponized, money gone, dignity shredded. The jury leaned in. It was damning, but defense attorneys are surgeons with doubt. Justin's lawyer painted him as a confused, emotionally abused husband, blinded by Celeste's manipulation. He was grieving. He believed he was losing his wife to illness and madness. He was seduced, used, and now they want to bury him for trusting the wrong person. Celeste's defense painted her as a victim of survival, claiming Justin had lured her in, sold her on a scheme, then turned on her when things spiraled. She never touched Madison. She never saw the insurance forms. She was a pawn, not a queen. It was chess with bloodstains. Until the USB drive arrived. A package mailed to the DA's office. No return address. Just one item. A flash drive with a folder labeled Clara's Final Play. Inside, audio recordings from Merida. One of the resort staff, also a survivor of Celeste's cons, had secretly recorded her conversations near the pool. She'd been bragging, talking about the fool back in the States, about how close it came, and how they both deserved it for being stupid enough to love. The judge admitted it, and the jury listened. Celeste's voice, cool and cruel, laughing as she recounted how she crushed Madison's medication into dust. You know what's funny? She actually thought she was just sick from stress. Adorable. Madison gripped my hand so hard I thought she might snap bone. It was the breaking point. No more doubt. No more arguments. The trial tipped like a scale made of glass. The prosecution rested the next day. And then, Justin did something none of us expected. He asked to testify. Against Celeste. There was a silence like the world had gone on mute. The defense scrambled, the judge called a recess, and the DA leaned forward like a lion catching scent of blood. Let him, Madison whispered. And they did. Justin took the stand, pale, sweating, speaking like a man cornered not by law, but by the weight of what he'd done. She told me we'd be free, he said. That no one would suspect, that once Madison was gone, we'd get the money and leave. She picked the poison. She filled out the paperwork. You just what? The DA asked, voice sharp. I just let her. There it was. Not confession. Not redemption. Cowardice. Polished in public. Madison didn't cry. Didn't flinch. She stared at him like she was watching a ghost she no longer feared. By the end of that week, the verdict came in. Justin, guilty on all counts. Celeste, guilty on all counts. Sentencing would come next month. Outside the courthouse, Madison stood in front of microphones for the first time. I didn't fake my death to destroy them, she said. I did it to survive. But if surviving meant showing the world what predators look like, then I have no regrets. I stood beside her. My cane steady, my heart steadier. And as the cameras flashed and the crowd applauded, I whispered, You did it, baby girl. She nodded. But she knew, like I did. The trial was over. The healing had just begun. The courthouse doors closed behind us with a thud that felt like the end of a chapter and the beginning of another we hadn't learned how to read yet. People cheered. Not for vengeance. For survival. Madison didn't wave. She didn't smile. She stood with her shoulders square and her chin high, absorbing it quietly, like rain she knew couldn't wash away the scars, but could at least cool the burn. Back at the safe house, we ate dinner without turning on the TV. No trial coverage. No news cycles. Just the sound of silverware on porcelain and the slow creak of my old house settling in the cold. I don't know what to do tomorrow, Madison said finally, stirring her mashed potatoes like they held the answer. You wake up, I said, and you do one good thing. Just one. For yourself. For your life. She looked at me. Her eyes weren't tired anymore. They were awake. Alert. Like the part of her that had been locked away behind Justin's cruelty was finally free to see daylight. And she did wake up the next morning and do one good thing. She called the DMV. To reclaim her legal identity. It sounds small, doesn't it? But imagine walking into a government building where your death certificate is still technically active. Imagine proving you're alive with documents that expired the day the world believed you were gone. The woman at the front desk blinked twice at the file. You're deceased, she said flatly. Not anymore, Madison replied. Surprise! We spent the day fixing her life like patching a broken quilt. Social security, health records, her bank, her voter registration, even her college alumni list. Each piece a stitch in the fabric of her existence. Each form a battle. It was exhausting. And liberating. At night, we sat on the porch again, wrapped in our shared blanket, and watched the wind scatter leaves across the lawn. Do you think people see me differently now? She asked. I considered it. They probably do, I said. But that's not the real question. She glanced at me. What is? Do you see yourself differently? Madison didn't answer at first, but her eyes shimmered, and that was enough. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. Justin was led into the courtroom in cuffs. He'd lost weight, not dramatically, but enough that his suit no longer fit right. He wouldn't meet Madison's eyes. Celeste had already been transferred to a federal facility. She'd been sentenced first 18 years without parole. Her courtroom was filled with the faces of past victims. She didn't say a word during sentencing. Not an apology, not a plea. She winked at a camera on the way out. Justin, on the other hand, was forced to listen to Madison's impact statement. She stood at the podium in a simple black dress, no makeup, no theatrics, just the truth. "You stole time from me," she said. "You made me doubt my body, my mind, my worth. You didn't love me. You studied me, like prey. And when I stopped shrinking for you, you tried to erase me." Justin didn't look up. She continued, "But I lived. And I will keep living. And you will remember every day that I am out there, breathing, loving, rebuilding, while you sit in silence with nothing but your own echoes." She walked away without another glance. The judge sentenced Justin to 22 years. No parole, no reduced time, just time, the one thing he thought he could manipulate. When the gavel struck, Madison let out a long breath, not relief, exactly, but release. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited again. This time, she stopped. "I'm not a symbol," she said into the cluster of microphones. "I'm a woman who was lied to, poisoned, and erased. And now I am rebuilding. I hope every survivor out there does the same." That night, we had soup and cornbread. Something simple. Something warm. She smiled for the first time in months. "I think I want to write," she said, sipping her tea. "About what?" "Not about him," she said. "About me, my story. Not the death, the life." I nodded. "Start with your name." She grabbed a napkin and scribbled 2 words across it. Madison Whitmore. And underneath it, reclaimed. Because reclaiming your name isn't about paperwork. It's about taking back the parts of you they couldn't kill. Her first invitation came in a pale blue envelope with gold embossing on the corner. Women's Leadership Forum, Keynote Speaker Inquiry. Madison turned it over in her hands like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. "I don't even know what I'd say," she told me. "You don't have to know yet," I replied. "You just have to know you deserve to be heard." She didn't say yes. Not then, but she didn't throw it away either. The truth is, when your name has been dragged through tabloids, discussed on forums, and used as hashtags without your permission, it's hard to remember that it ever belonged to you in the first place. Speaking publicly wasn't about fame for Madison, it was about reclaiming her own story before the world twisted it into a cautionary tale. It took weeks, but eventually, she agreed. The first event was in Baltimore, small. A room of 40 women, some survivors, some advocates, some just curious. She wore a dark green dress, the same one she used to wear on holidays, familiar armor. I sat in the back, near the refreshments, watching her walk onto the stage with a slight tremor in her step. And then, like a switch flipping, she owned the room. "I don't speak to inspire you," she began. "I speak because I was silent too long, and silence nearly killed me." They leaned in. Some took notes. Others simply cried. Afterward, women lined up just to hold her hand, to say thank you, to whisper, "Me too." That night, in our hotel room, she stared at the ceiling for a long time. "I didn't expect them to cry," she said. "They weren't crying for you," I replied. "They were crying for themselves. You just gave them permission." A week later, an email arrived. Subject line, "I owe you an apology." It was from Lena, a name that hit Madison like a forgotten bruise. Her former friend, maid of honor, the woman who had stood silently beside her wedding cake and later stood silently beside Justin when the accusations began. "She's asking to meet," Madison said, holding her phone like it might burn through her palm. "She says she believed him, that she thought I was being dramatic, that she couldn't see it." "Do you want to see her?" She paused. "I don't know." We met her at a small cafe on a Tuesday morning. Neutral territory, no makeup, no armor, just real air between them. Lena was already seated when we arrived. She stood, hands wringing, eyes red-rimmed. "Madison," she began, her voice already cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know I was wrong." Madison sat slowly. I kept my distance, sipping tea from a nearby table but listening close. "You didn't just believe him," Madison said, voice steady. "You defended him. You told people I was unstable." Lena nodded. "I did. I thought he was charming. Logical. And you were so tired, so thin. And you never asked why," Madison cut in. Silence. Then Lena reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. "This was yours," she said softly. "Your grandmother's ring. You gave it to me for safekeeping when you got sick. I didn't think you'd want it back after everything, but now I know I never should have held on to it." Madison took the box, opened it, and stared at the small sapphire set in silver. She didn't speak. Finally, she closed it and slid it into her coat. "I'm not ready to be friends," she said. "I understand," Lena replied, "but I'm glad you came." And that was the only closure they would ever need. Afterward, as we walked to the car, I glanced sideways at Madison. "You okay?" She nodded, slowly. "She's not who I lost. I was, and I think I finally found myself again." More invitations followed. A podcast series. A book agent. A small documentary team offering to do things on her terms. She declined most of it. Madison wasn't interested in being a spectacle. She just wanted peace. But she said yes to one small community center appearance in the very town where she'd once been the girl who vanished. And when she walked into that room where mothers, teachers, and nurses sat waiting, she didn't just speak. She testified, not about Justin, not about Celeste, about surviving herself. The version of her that accepted less. The version that kept smiling through fear. The version that called it love because no one had taught her the difference. "I'm not here because I beat evil," she told them. "I'm here because I stopped letting it wear my face in the mirror." They gave her a standing ovation. She cried, just once. Later that night, on our porch, I asked her, "Are you ready to live again?" She leaned her head on my shoulder, a small smile on her lips. "I think I already am." It arrived on a gray Thursday, just as we were pulling banana bread out of the oven. A thick envelope, no return address, smudged with fingerprints. The paper inside smelled faintly like cheap cologne and something colder, prison soap, maybe. I knew that smell. My brother did 2 years back in the day. Once it's in your nose, it never quite leaves. Madison opened it with a butter knife, slow and unsure. Then she froze. "What is it?" I asked, my hands still dusted with flour. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out the single sheet of paper and read in silence. Her face shifted, not fear, not anger. Something more like disgust, wrapped in confusion. She handed it to me. At the top, Justin Whitmore, inmate #61204, Bayville Correctional Facility. Below that, his handwriting neat, practiced. He always had penmanship like a man who wanted people to believe him. "Madison, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve to ask for it, but I'm writing because I've had a lot of time to think. About us, about what I did, about who I became. You're probably burning this already. Maybe you should. But if you're still reading, I want you to know something. Celeste used me, yes, but I let her. I let everything happen because I thought I deserved more than I had, that you were holding me back, that your pain was a burden, not something sacred I should have protected. I know that now. Too late, I know. I'm not asking for a reply. I just wanted you to know that I remember everything, and I regret it all. Yours, once, Justin." I stared at the paper in my hand for a long moment before folding it carefully and setting it aside like a dirty rag. "You okay?" I asked her. "I don't know," she said. We sat down at the table, the banana bread forgotten, its warm scent clinging to a moment now ruined. "Are you angry he wrote it?" "I'm angry he gets to explain himself," she said. "He gets to sound human. He gets to try and tie a neat bow around the horror he put me through." I nodded. "I don't want to answer," she said firmly. "You don't have to. But I want to say something. Not to him. For me." So that night, she wrote. Not a reply. A declaration. She didn't sign it. She didn't plan to send it. But the words poured out like something cracked open inside her. To the man who tried to erase me. You thought silence would keep me small, that if you poisoned me slow enough, I wouldn't notice the color fading from my skin or the light from my eyes. You thought grief would blind me to your cruelty, but it didn't. You don't get to be yours. Once. You were never mine. You were only ever a shadow standing where a man should have been. And now I know real love doesn't make you feel like you're dying to prove it. I lived. That's the only reply you'll get. She folded it and slid it into her journal. Then she stood up, poured herself a glass of red wine, and opened the windows. Let the cold air in, let the weight go. Over the next few days, the media tried to stir it up again. Justin Whitmore expresses remorse. Exclusive letter, they teased. But Madison didn't respond. No interviews. No public reaction. Just the silence of a woman who no longer owed the world anything. Instead, she took a road trip. Just her playlist of 90s ballads, and a long stretch of highway to Maine. She visited her favorite childhood beach, ate clam chowder at a seaside diner, walked barefoot along the cold shoreline where her father used to fly kites. I didn't go. Some journeys you take alone. When she came back a week later, her skin was wind-chapped, and her suitcase smelled like salt and cedar. She hugged me like someone returning from the war. I left him behind, she whispered. And I believed her. Closure doesn't always come with confrontation. Sometimes it comes with distance, silence, and a letter burned in the fireplace. The call came on a sleepy Sunday morning, the kind where the birds hadn't quite shaken off the chill and the coffee barely did more than warm your hands. Madison had just stepped out to the porch with a blanket draped around her shoulders and my dog-eared copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God in her lap when the phone rang. The number was blocked. She almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello? A woman's voice crackled through the line, rough, strained, like someone unused to talking but too urgent not to. Is this Madison Whitmore? Madison sat up straighter. Yes. My name's Josie Vargas. You don't know me. But I knew her. Celeste. Or whatever she was calling herself then. Madison blinked. You knew her? In Phoenix. She went by Leah Summer. We worked together at a nonprofit clinic for 3 months. She was charming, smart, the kind of woman who gets people to hand over their wallet and say thank you. Madison knew that type. She left without warning, took petty cash from the clinic, stole from one of our coworkers his family heirloom watch. And, Madison prompted. She left me with something worse than a stolen watch. Madison's fingers curled tighter around the phone. She ruined my marriage, said she was helping me confront emotional abuse, got into my head, turned me against my husband. I left him, thinking I was saving myself. Turns out I was just cutting my life in half and handing her the better part. There was a long pause. Madison didn't rush her. I found your trial online, Josie continued. I didn't think it was the same woman, but then I saw the smile. That same little tilt at the corner like she's always a half second away from mocking you. Madison knew that smile. She scarred me, Josie said. Not on the outside, not in ways the law tracks, but in the quiet, the trust, the part of me that believed people meant well. She did more than that to me, Madison said softly. I know, and I'm sorry. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't say I'm crazy. You're not. They didn't say goodbye, just breathed into the silence together until the line went dead. Later that afternoon, Madison told me everything, and I saw something flicker across her face I hadn't seen in weeks. Not fear, not trauma, purpose. She's left a trail, she said. All these people, and only a handful ever came forward. You think there are more? Dozens, maybe more. She opened her laptop and pulled up a blank document. What are you doing? I asked. Starting something, she said. A place for the others. Within a week, she launched the Whitmore Project, a digital archive and survivor network for anyone who had been conned, emotionally manipulated, or psychologically abused by someone like Celeste. Not just about her, but people like her. Predators with no fingerprints. She published a video message. Some wounds don't leave bruises, she said into the camera. Some abusers don't raise fists. Some destroy from the inside out. This is for you. The site exploded. Stories poured in. Not just about Celeste, but about teachers, bosses, ex-lovers, neighbors, people who gaslighted, eroded, poisoned bit by bit. It became a map of unseen pain and unexpected resilience. Women, men, survivors. Each story stitched a wider net around the culture of silence. Then one message arrived that changed everything again. It was anonymous at first. No name, no photo, just 3 lines. I know where she's hiding again. She's not done. She's watching you. Madison stared at the screen. Her face went pale, but her jaw set hard. She's not coming back, I said firmly. No, Madison agreed. She won't get the chance. Because now, Madison wasn't running from ghosts. She was hunting the truth. The message replayed in Madison's mind like a broken radio signal. She's watching you. It came from an encrypted email address, the kind hackers use. No metadata, no trace. We ran it through everything we had, Brooks, an old friend of mine at the sheriff's department, even a cybersecurity guy Madison once dated in college. Nothing. But the timing was too sharp, too deliberate. And the warning? It felt real. That night, Madison stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing plates, staring into the dark yard like she expected to see Celeste behind the oak tree. She's not here, I said, drying a dish. But she's out there, Madison whispered. The next day, she posted a quiet update on the Whitmore project. No fear, no panic, just a request. If you've seen her anywhere, in any form, under any name, send me a message. Confidential, no police, just truth. 2 hours later, a woman from Colorado responded. She's in Denver, the woman wrote, at a private retreat center, goes by Marla Rain, runs grief sessions for high-end clients. My sister went, said Marla had these eyes like she knew your secrets before you told them. I saw her photo on your site. It's her. The retreat center was real. Swanky, remote, nestled into the mountains like a secret whispered to the trees. Website full of buzzwords, trauma release, inner alignment, sacred renewal. The headshot? A slightly altered Celeste. Shorter hair, no lashes, more earth goddess, less executive wife. But unmistakable. She's doing it again, Madison said, finding pain and sinking her claws into it. We brought the info to Detective Brooks. She was sympathetic, but cautious. No warrant, no hard evidence. We can alert local authorities, but you know how these private retreats operate. And she's slippery. Madison nodded slowly. So I go in. My heart froze. What? She trusts women in pain. She feeds on it. I go in as just another grieving woman. She won't know it's me. Not right away. You can't. She taught me how to disappear, remember? Madison said with a tight smile. I'll use it one last time. We argued. I cried. She held my hand and promised she'd be careful. And a week later, she left with a fake ID, a burner phone, and a duffel bag full of yoga pants and unspoken vengeance. She became Diane Rivers, widowed, isolated, looking for clarity. The retreat center welcomed her like a long-lost soul. She called every night from a payphone down the road. She's here, Madison whispered. She walks the halls like a queen. Her new name fits her like a crown. And everyone, they love her. They hang on her every word. Be careful, I said every time. I'm watching, she whispered back. She attended sessions. She cried during circle shares. She let herself be pulled in just enough to see the pattern. Then one night, she saw Celeste or Marla slip a small vial into someone's tea. A young woman named Cassie, pale, waifish, too eager to please. Cassie collapsed the next morning with what the center called a spiritual detox reaction. Madison took her to the edge of the woods that evening and told her everything. Cassie ran, called her sister, reported the healer. By morning, law enforcement swarmed the place. Celeste tried to flee. In leggings and hiking boots, she ran into the woods like a phantom, but Madison was already waiting near the back trail. No more masks, Madison said as she stepped into her path. Celeste stopped. Her hair was wet, her eyes wide, and for the first time in years, she looked afraid. You don't belong in the light, Madison said. You only know how to survive in other people's darkness. I didn't hurt anyone this time, Celeste whispered, like it mattered. But you would've, Madison replied, because you always do. Then the sirens came. And this time, Celeste didn't vanish. They cuffed her, and she screamed. But it wasn't rage. It was fear. Because this time, the prey had hunted back. Later, when Madison returned home, she stood on the porch and said nothing for a long time. Then it's done. Are you sure? Yes, she said. I looked into the eyes of my worst fear, and she blinked. The courtroom was smaller this time, less cameras, less flash, but heavier. Because this wasn't about proving guilt anymore. That had been done. This was about closure, finality. The judge would sentence Celeste based on new charges, fraud, attempted poisoning, operating under false identity across state lines. Madison sat in the front row, not as a victim. As the one who stopped it, Celeste entered in cuffs and beige scrubs. Her hair was shorter now, frizzy at the ends. Gone was the sharp glamour. No lipstick, no smirk. Just a hollowed-out version of the woman who once ruined lives with a smile. She didn't look at Madison, but Madison looked straight at her. The DA called Madison to the stand. It was the third time she'd testified in 2 years, but this one felt different. This time, she wasn't just recounting pain. She was defining her power. I entered that retreat under a false name, she began, because it was the only way to expose the truth. Not about her identity, but about her pattern. She doesn't stop. She finds wounded people. She studies them. She builds a false mirror of trust. And when they lean in to love her, she uses that mirror to cut them. Celeste shifted, but still didn't speak. Madison continued, her voice unwavering. I'm here today not to ask for punishment. I'm here to protect the next woman, the next grieving daughter, the next lonely widow. I'm here so no one else has to bury their soul to survive a lie. Her words echoed. Even the court clerk wiped a tear. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was grave. Celeste, also known as Veronica Hines, Rebecca Ford, Marla Rain, and at least 6 other aliases, we find your actions to be not only criminal, but predatory. You operated without conscience. You destroyed lives not out of necessity, but for gain. He sentenced her to 30 years. No parole. No appeals. As the gavel fell, Madison didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just breathed. Later that week, we stood in the backyard together, pruning the lilac bushes her grandmother once planted. It was quiet, peaceful. You know, she said, I used to think justice was this loud, dramatic thing, flashy, triumphant. And now? I asked. She smiled softly. Now I think it's the silence after the storm. When no one's watching. When you finally feel safe enough to rest. She bought a small house by the lake that spring. Simple. One story, wraparound porch, a dog named June she rescued from a shelter. She planted herbs in the windowsill, lavender by the gate. And every Sunday, she hosted coffee mornings for women in town. Some were survivors, others just lonely. But they came, because word spread, not about the scandal, about her. The woman who didn't die. The woman who hunted her own ghost and came back whole. One morning, as I brought a plate of scones out to the porch, I saw her sitting with a young girl barely 20 who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Madison handed her a cup of tea. She was saying something soft, gentle. I didn't hear the words, but I knew the message. You're not alone. You're not crazy, and you can come back from this. Because she did. It came in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Again. Madison found it tucked between her electricity bill and a coupon flyer innocuous enough to ignore, but something about the weight of it made her pause. She opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten invitation on thick stationery. Miss Whitmore, we are producing a new national series titled Unspoken, Stories That Changed Us, to highlight extraordinary individuals who survived the unthinkable and chose to rebuild. Your name was brought up by multiple survivors who credited your story as the reason they sought help. We are requesting a sit-down interview, on your terms, at your home or another location of your choosing. No sensationalism, just truth. With respect, Carly Pennington, Senior Producer, Whitmore and Lane Productions. Whitmore. Madison stared at that name, her own printed by someone else. Claimed, legitimated. Not as a scandal, but as a source of light. Still, she set the letter aside. She didn't need to be on television. She had her garden, her dog, the women who came every Sunday for warm scones and real talk. But that night, as she washed her face, she stared at herself in the mirror. No makeup, hair tied back, soft pajama collar folded under her chin, and whispered, "Why not me?" And the answer echoed, "Because they made you believe your voice was dangerous." Not anymore. 2 days later, she called the number. "This is Madison Whitmore," she said. "Tell Carly I'll speak to her. One time, at my place. No makeup crew, no retakes, no scripts. If she agrees to that, we'll talk." She agreed. When Carly arrived, tall, red-haired, eyes like someone who had seen her own quiet wars, she didn't bring a camera crew. Just a mic, a notepad, and an open heart. They sat on the back porch. June lay curled at Madison's feet. "I'm not interested in repeating trauma," Madison said first, "but I am interested in showing that a story doesn't have to end in darkness." Carly smiled. "That's all I want, too." The interview lasted an hour. They talked about grief, not just over lost love, but lost trust. They talked about healing, not the Instagram kind, but the real, gritty, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind. They talked about names and how Madison had to die to remember who she really was. At the end, Carly said, "Is there anything you'd like people watching this to remember, if they forget everything else?" Madison looked into the lens just once and said, "You are not what they did to you. You are what you decide to build from the rubble. Don't let someone else write the last chapter of your story." When it aired 3 weeks later, the response was quiet at first. Then came the letters, handwritten, typed, messaged through the Whitmore Project, sent with flowers, sent with prayers. A woman in Michigan who left a 10-year marriage with nothing but a suitcase. A man in Utah who finally told his sister what their uncle did when they were kids. A teacher in Georgia who kept a copy of Madison's quote in her desk drawer to read before staff meetings. The ripple became a wave. But Madison never chased it. She just kept her Sunday mornings, her quiet, her peace. Until one Sunday, a woman named Nina showed up to the porch gathering, carrying a scar no one could see, but Madison somehow recognized instantly. "I saw you on TV," Nina said, hugging herself tight. "I thought, maybe if you made it, I could too." Madison took her hand. Firm, gentle. "You already did," she said. And in that moment, surrounded by women and sunlight and the scent of warm blueberry muffins, Madison Whitmore finally understood. Her story was never about endings. It was about open doors. It started with a paper cup. No dramatic entrance. No charming stranger sweeping through a bookstore aisle. Just a to-go cup of black coffee left sitting on the railing of Madison's porch one Monday morning. It was 6:30 a.m., too early for visitors, too early even for birdsong. Madison blinked at it like it might be a mistake. And then she saw the note, written in sharp pen on the side of the cup. "Hazelnut. No cream. You always take it this way after it rains. R." Her heart paused. There was only one R in her orbit now, Robert, the new part-time groundskeeper at the community center where she'd started volunteering. Late 50s, quiet eyes, moved like someone who used to speak loudly but had long ago learned the value of silence. They'd shared passing conversations over gardening gloves and weekend cleanup duties. He'd helped her carry mulch once, and after she sneezed from the dust, handed her a fresh bottle of water without a word. But this? A coffee? And the note? She looked up and down the street. Empty. Still wet from last night's storm. She didn't drink it. Not yet. But she did smile. That Friday, at the center, Robert was trimming hydrangeas when Madison approached with slow steps. "You left something on my porch." He didn't look up, just smiled faintly. Seemed like a good morning for Hazelnut. Madison folded her arms, amused. "You always watch people that closely?" "Only the ones who water plants when no one's looking." They both chuckled softly. She handed him a small brown bag. Inside, a chocolate croissant. "No note," she said, "but I figured you're more flaky buttery than sweet glazed." He looked at her with a kind of quiet reverence, like she wasn't flirting, she was trusting, and that meant more than any charm could have offered. They didn't call it dating. Not at first. They shared shifts at the community garden, went to estate sales on Saturdays, sat on benches with thermoses of soup, and traded old records like secrets. He never pried. Never asked about Justin. Never mentioned the trials or the television appearance. But he did listen to everything else. One chilly evening, they stood together watching the sun fall behind the lake. He wore an old army jacket that smelled faintly of cedar and gasoline. Madison had her fingers wrapped around a mug of cider. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "if your life got paused somewhere and you forgot to press play again?" Robert didn't answer immediately. He looked out over the water and let the question settle. "My wife passed 6 years ago," he said softly. "Breast cancer. She used to sing while folding laundry. I haven't turned on music since." Madison's breath caught, not because it was sad, because it was real. She reached over, touched his hand just briefly. A shared silence between survivors. Spring bloomed fast that year, crocuses popping through the thaw, geese returning like old debts. The lake glimmered again. And one night, after a community center fundraiser, Madison drove Robert home. It wasn't planned. He usually took the bus, but the night was cold, and he'd forgotten his gloves. They sat in her car outside his modest apartment, neither reaching for the door handle. Robert cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about that pause you talked about." "Oh? I think I finally want to hit play again." Madison didn't reply. Not with words. She leaned over, and for the first time in years, allowed herself the vulnerability of a kiss, not rushed, not desperate, just soft, warm, human. Like a door she didn't realize had remained locked, creaked open with the simplest push. They took it slow. They needed to. Madison had scars that still itched when the weather turned cold. Robert had ghosts in every song he avoided. But there was grace in the way they navigated it. They set boundaries without fear. Shared Sunday mornings, but always in separate houses. He learned how she flinched at unexpected footsteps. She learned he liked to leave lights on in hallways not because he was afraid of the dark, but because he once stubbed his toe during a blackout and never trusted shadows since. Then came June, her birthday. He showed up with a pot of lavender, not flowers. "Lavender roots better," he said. "Stays longer than roses." They planted it together near her back gate. Afterward, he poured them both lemonade and handed her a small envelope. Inside, a photo. Of her. At the community center last fall, laughing, sun in her hair, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. "I took this," he said. "Didn't mean to. Camera just clicked." Madison stared at it. She looked alive. Not poised, not performing. Just herself. "It's the first picture of me I've liked in a long time," she whispered. "You're allowed to be seen," he replied. She nodded. But the tears came anyway. That night, she sat on her porch long after Robert left, staring at the photo. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt safe. Not just from danger, from doubt. From the version of herself that thought she'd never trust again. The woman she was now didn't live in fear. She lived in truth. And maybe, in hope. It arrived in an unmarked envelope. The handwriting unfamiliar, slanted, deliberate. Madison found it wedged between a charity flyer and a gardening catalog, nearly tossed it without looking. But something about it held her still. No return address. Just her name, written in blue ink. Madison Whitmore. Her heart kicked once hard. She waited until evening. Robert had left after dinner. June was curled by the fireplace, and the house was quiet enough to hear memory knocking. She opened it. Inside, 3 pages, folded neatly, no salutation. "I wasn't sure you'd read this. I'm not even sure I have the right to send it, but if silence has taught me anything, it's that regret weighs more than rejection. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I'm Justin's mother." Madison stared at the name. Margaret. The woman who never showed up to court. Never sent a condolence. Never called. Not once. But the words on the page trembled with something else, not justification. Grief. When Justin was sentenced, "I didn't come to you because I was ashamed. Not of him, of myself. I raised him. I made excuses when I should have raised boundaries. I told him he was special when he needed to learn humility. And when you married him, I thought you'd fix what I hadn't. That wasn't your job." I saw the headlines. I watched the trial alone in my kitchen, with the lights off. I cried when I should have called. I prayed when I should have apologized. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. I'm old, tired, and my son, he's not coming back. Not the version I believed in. But I wanted you to know that I believe you. I always did. I just didn't know how to say it without collapsing. If you never write back, I'll understand. But if one day you want to talk not about him, but about you, I'll be here. Quiet, grateful, and waiting. Margaret. Madison read it twice, then folded it back with careful fingers. Not because it was fragile, because she was. Later, she told Robert. He didn't push, just listened. What will you do? He asked. She looked out the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. I don't know yet. That night, she reread old journals. Back when she first met Justin. Back when Margaret used to send her pot roast recipes and birthday cards. Back when she believed family was a bond, not a battlefield. She remembered Margaret's laugh, her almond cookies, the way she used to fix the hem of Madison's skirts like she was already calling her daughter. There was a time Margaret was safe, before it all unraveled, before denial became survival. The next morning, Madison wrote a letter. Not long, just a page. Margaret, thank you for your letter. I didn't know I needed it until it arrived. I believe you loved your son. I also believe you're not responsible for his choices, but how you respond to them matters. Your silence hurt. But your words help. I'm not ready for a meeting. Maybe I never will be, but I wanted you to know I read it, and I heard you. Madison. She sealed it. No return address, just a message. A small mercy. A sliver of peace. Weeks passed. The lilacs bloomed. Madison started teaching a writing workshop at the community center called Letters We Never Sent. She told the class, some things are too heavy to carry, so we write them down. Not to forget, but to finally set them down. One woman wrote to a mother who abandoned her, another to a brother lost to addiction. One man wrote to his 20-year-old self. At the end of each session, they dropped their letters into a locked box called The River. No one read them, but the act of releasing them, it was enough. One afternoon, as she packed up her materials, Madison found a note tucked inside her folder, slipped in by someone quiet, anonymous. It read, Your voice is a boat. Mine was drowning until I heard it. She held it to her chest. Sometimes, healing didn't come from the ones who hurt you. It came from the ones who saw you after. Who stayed, who listened, who whispered, You're still here. It had been almost 3 years. 3 years since the trial. 3 years since the ashes settled on everything Madison thought her life would be. But today, she returned. Not as a victim. Not as a widow. Not even as the woman from the headlines. Just Madison Whitmore. And she was ready. The house on Oakview Lane hadn't changed much. The shutters were freshly painted. A new car sat in the driveway. The family who lived there now had planted rose bushes in the front yard, their blooms bold and red against the green. She didn't knock. She hadn't come for conversation. She stood across the street, her coat pulled tight around her, June at her side, leash slack in her hand. It was just a house. But once, it had been everything. Her marriage, her illusions, her silence. Inside those walls, she'd learned how to smile through betrayal, to cook dinner with broken trust simmering just beneath the sauce, to fold laundry beside a man whose phone buzzed with someone else's name. She had nearly disappeared in that house. Nearly, but not quite. She took a deep breath, walked slowly up to the curb, and there, with the sun hanging low in a sky streaked gold and lavender, she did what she hadn't been able to do back then. She let go. Out loud. I forgive you, she whispered. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. June sat beside her, calm. A wind passed through the trees. She turned to leave. But just before she did, the front door opened. A young woman stepped out barefoot, holding a baby against her hip. Her eyes met Madison's, curious but kind. Can I help you? She called across the lawn. Madison hesitated, then smiled. No, she said softly. You already are. The woman smiled back, puzzled, and disappeared inside. That evening, Madison drove to the lake. Robert met her with 2 thermoses, hers peppermint, his black. They sat on the old dock, feet dangling over water that had seen every season of her life. She told him about the house, the woman, the baby. He listened the way he always did without filling the silence. I used to think justice would feel like thunder, she said. And now? Now it feels like being able to leave. Robert nodded. You know what I admire most about you? He asked. Madison raised an eyebrow. You kept choosing. Even when you were bruised, even when you were tired, You kept choosing to live. She leaned her head on his shoulder, not out of weakness, out of rest. In the months that followed, the Whitmore Project expanded. Survivors became mentors. The community center launched a scholarship in Madison's name for women rebuilding their lives. She published a memoir, not a tell-all, but a tell-true. Tending the Quiet, How I Grew Back After Being Broken. It hit the bestseller list. But she didn't tour, didn't do morning shows. Instead, she planted vegetables, took June on long walks, loved Robert in slow, gentle ways, and every Sunday, her porch stayed open. Banana bread, tea, story after story told beneath fairy lights and dusk. Because healing wasn't a destination, it was a practice, a choice, a quiet revolution. One night, just before the first frost, Madison wrote a final letter. She didn't send it, just folded it and tucked it beneath the lavender plant by her gate. To the woman I used to be, you did your best with what you had. And now? You can rest. I've got it from here. Love. The woman who lived. Madison's journey reminds us that healing isn't loud, it's patient, deliberate, and deeply personal. She teaches us that survival is only the beginning. Reclaiming your voice, your peace, and your purpose is where true strength begins. Justice doesn't always wear a robe or hold a gavel sometimes. It's found in choosing to live well, love again, and build a life that no one can take from you. Most of all, her story tells us this: no matter how broken you feel, you are never beyond repair.